Hello, this is Margarita Monet from Edge of Paradise, and you are listening to the Metal Pit Podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit Podcast. I'm your host, Blake. Every week we get together and dive deep into the albums and bands that shaped metal. Please visit our website, The Metal Pit, at www.themetalpit.org. And you can find album reviews, interviews, and live show reviews there. And you can follow us on our socials, which is Facebook and Instagram. Both are at The Metal Pit. And if you want to visit us on our YouTube channel, we just passed 1,000 subscribers recently, but we need way more. And you can visit that at youtube.com at the Metal Pit 666. And the Instagram, or for Instagram, the podcast, we have an Instagram for the podcast now, which is at the Metal Pit Podcast. So follow us there too. And if you want to email me about the podcast, you can email me podcast@themetalpit.org. And and we just, Stacia, one of our writers, just made a reel for me to promote the podcast. And somebody commented saying we should do Malice's album In the Beginning. You know that album, Eric? Sorry, Eric's with me.
Hello.
Eric, how are you? Sorry, I didn't introduce you yet.
No problem. I am ready to chat some six string with you today. I'm really pumped up, Blake. I've heard of Malice, but I'm not that familiar with them.
Yeah. I had their first two albums. I think that's their first album, this person said, but I told them to think about it and I'll have to find somebody that's into Malice.
Right.
I know they were featured in a movie once called Vice Versa that had Judge Reinhold was in it with the kid the kid that played Kevin Arnold on that sitcom. I forget the name of the sitcom. But anyway, they were in it. They changed places or something. They went to see Malice in concert or something, like whatever. It's one of those Freaky Friday kind of movies.
Yeah, and it sounds like, man, when you're talking about the Judge, when you mentioned that Judge, that's definitely going back quite a few years.
But I remember Malice was on the thing, whatever.
Cool.
Anyway, but they never made it really big. But anyway, I just thought I mentioned that. Okay, so Eric's here. Eric's he's my American friend here from Virginia, and of course I am in Canada. And so this week on Monday is Canada Day here in Canada for Canada's birthday, and Thursday is July 4th holiday in the United States. So we have our combined here, Canada American. So at the end of the podcast, I'll mention this now. Eric is going to give his top 10 US born guitarists of all time. And me, I'm going to give my top 10 Canadian guitarists of all time. So that's our celebration of Canada Day and July 4th. But first, we're going to talk about a guitarist that will probably be on Eric's list. And we're going to talk about Joe Satriani's Surfing with the Alien album. This is our first episode on an instrumental album. I believe, I'm pretty sure anyway, yes. And let me start briefly, just quickly. Oh, sorry, I had eye surgery recently, so I'm getting used to my new eyes. Okay, Joe Satriani, American rock guitarist, composer, songwriter, and I guess teacher too. Early in his career, he worked as a guitar instructor, and some of his former students were Steve Vai, Rick Hunolt, I think of Exodus, I'm not mistaken. Kirk Hammett of some band, I think you pronounce it Metallica, he was in, and Alex Skolnick from Testament fame. I'm not sure if he's still in Testament. I can't remember.
He is.
Okay, he is. I couldn't remember if he left or whatever. But anyway, Satriani himself went on to a successful solo career, and he's still doing it because his last album came out in 2022, and that was called The Elephant of Mars, which I don't even know if I even listened to it. And his debut full-length album was Not of This Earth, which came out in 1986. And he has 18 studio albums and a bunch of live albums. And his first, before that, Not of This Earth, he had an EP called Dreaming Number 11, which I happen to have on vinyl.
I have it on cassette.
And it's weird. I just looked at it because I obviously hadn't listened to it in a while, but like there's two sides, of course, since it's a vinyl. There's only one song on side one and 3 songs on side 2. Not really sure why that is. But anyway. So anyway, so we're going to talk about his second full-length studio album, Surfing with the Alien. Well, first we'll ask Eric, when do you remember when you first discovered Joe Satriani?
I would say it was either in 86 or 87. Um, and I was absolutely floored. I want to say it was actually that video, Dissect Boogie. That's what I want to say. How about yourself, Blake? When did you first hear of Joe?
Well, it's hard to remember exactly. I'm gonna
I
think
hear you.
I'm gonna think it's probably because I liked Metallica back in '83 and probably started reading, interviews, articles, and where it said that Kirk Hammett was taught by Joe Satriani. That's probably, I'm thinking, why I looked up Joe Satriani, because I don't remember hearing anything or seeing anything until that moment, probably thinking, oh, let me go see who taught Kirk Hammett how to play guitar. Well, not maybe taught him, but gave him some tips, lessons, whatever. So that's probably why I checked out Joe Satriani. And like I say, I have the debut EP and I have Surfing with the Alien on vinyl, but I can't remember saying I bought the EP first or if I would have went back after I got Surfing with the Alien. It's kind of hard to remember that stuff. But I know Surfing with the and he's got all these albums out, like I say, but I definitely like Surfing with the Alien, and then the one that after it, I believe, is Flying in a Blue Dream. Those are my two favorite ones.
It is, and I'm 100% with you on that.
And those are the ones I listen to the most. I think I don't know, they blew your mind when you first listened to it, especially Surfing with the Alien, I think, compared to the EP. I haven't listened to that EP in a while, but it kind of blew your mind. And it was just in the time probably when I got a guitar myself, even though I never kept up with it. But he was a big inspiration for people playing the guitar, of course, as with his teaching of some of the greats too. There are guys that became greats. Now we're going to talk. This album came out in October of 1987, released on Relativity Records. It's one of his most successful to date. I'm not sure. Probably Flying in a Blue Dream maybe is more successful. I'm not sure.
Actually, can I interject? So
Sure.
I looked it up. I know you're the master of Wikipedia and kind of the background. I was just kind of curious. I peeked at it, and Surfing with the Alien is the only album by Joe Satriani to go platinum.
Okay.
So it's his most successful album.
Yeah, I don't know why, because this is from Wikipedia, what I was reading. And I did see that it did go platinum in the United States.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there is another album that sold more.
That's his only one from. I only checked one source, it was Wikipedia as well, that mentioned that I'm sorry, Surfing was the only one that it's his only album ever to go platinum, and it was Surfing with an Alien. I thought maybe Flying in a Blue Dream would kind of break that mold, because that was an extremely popular album. I had so many friends that were into it in high school. I mean, I couldn't get enough of it myself, but apparently it didn't quite reach the platinum status.
Because he sold over 10 million records all time, it says. But yes, so this probably is, I would imagine this is the most selling one. Also, I was going to mention, of course, G3 is something he started, which is him on tour with Steve Vai usually and another guitarist. It's been Eric Johnson before. It's been John Petrucci from Dream Theater before. I saw it once with a guy named Eric Sardinas, and he was good too, but he was never in a band. He just did solo stuff, I believe, and he was more of a bluesy kind of guy, I think, there. And what was I going to say? Oh, now the drums on this album, which I didn't notice till today, because I never really paid attention to it back then when you're younger and stuff. But the drums are all just, except for one song, most of the drums are just a drum machine, because he needed to save money to make this album. Because he obviously plays the guitar, he plays the bass, whatever, he does everything else. But he had Jeff Campitelli he overdubbed some of the hi-hats and cymbals and snares and things like that and added to the songs. But the only song, I think it's Satch Boogie, is the only song to feature full drums by a drummer instead of a drum machine. Because actually, I was reading a review somewhere of somebody's album review of this album, and they said, "Oh, the drums on this song are pretty cool." But I'm thinking, do you know that it's a drum machine? Complimenting. Of course, somebody's got to program the drum machine to do it and stuff.
It
But
takes time. I've been there.
yes, and
Yeah.
I think that was Bongo Bob Smith was the guy that programmed the drums, from what I read. But so yeah, but I don't have any problem with that because you're here for the guitar on this album. You're not here to hear drums anyway. But I'm sure he did have a drummer on. I didn't look all this stuff up because I don't have time. I had a busy week with eye surgery and not being able to see and stuff. So, but I'm sure he did have a drummer eventually that played on his. Maybe this is the only one. I don't know. Do you know that at all?
I believe, yeah, I'm pretty certain that this is the only album where he didn't have anybody drumming except for on Satch Boogie. He just had a drummer on that track. Yeah, and I did see it the other day, and yeah, and the drummer you mentioned, the Capitelli, Campitelli, he's actually played with him live before. He's the he played drums on Satch Boogie, and as you said, he did some overdubs, and that was it. All of his other albums, I have to think about Night of This Earth. I got to admit, I'm not a huge fan of that album, but his other albums after Surfing, he had live drummers. He had actual drummers, I should say.
Yeah, because see, on his first EP, it says Bongo Bob Smith percussion, but it also has Jeff Campitelli drums on that one. But
Yeah.
so it's kind of weird that he didn't keep them for the, but maybe he just couldn't afford it or something because he had a budget or something.
Studio time's expensive.
Anyway. And of course, Joe Satriani, he had that G3 thing. He also played in that group Chickenfoot, which maybe, I don't know if they're going to make another album or not, because I looked at the Wikipedia for Chickenfoot and it showed that the drummer is Jason Bonham and it had 2024 beside his name, which of course is this year. So I don't know if they're working on a new album or not. That's with, of course, Michael Anthony on bass from Van Halen.
I know that they're on tour together. They're actually coming. Yeah, they're coming to Virginia. Actually, it's Sammy Hagar solo, and then Joe Satriani's opening up for him. So it's not truly Chickenfoot, but it's a couple of the artists, obviously, like Hagar, the vocalist, and Satriani, the guitar virtuoso.
Okay, and the one song on this one, Crush. I'm just mentioning this before I could have waited till we did the song, but Crushing Day is the only solo on the album that he worked out beforehand, apparently, due to his.
I found that. Yeah, I found that fascinating. I mean, you think about how often you and I have listened to this, and other, so many other fans have listened to this album, and so much of it sounds like it was thought out, it was constructed, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, that's just too much.
He just said he improvised all the solos and stuff, but then when he regrets it now because it was hard to do in concert. Yes, when he was playing them live.
He made more work for himself.
But anyway, let's get to the album. So Surfing with the Alien, track 1 is of course the title track, Surfing with the Alien. So what do you think, Eric?
Oh boy, what an opener. We got this up-tempo 12-bar blues rhythm that starts things off. And then he comes in with this guitar melody with teeth. Joe's use of pentaharmonics gives this song its identity. At 109, as you can tell, I'm pretty precise here, he implements some pick tapping high on the fretboard, which creates this very dramatic effect. I really just gush over his solo work on this opening track. It really sets the stage for what's to come on a brilliant album. What'd you think of it, Blake?
Well, this is like one of my 2 favorite songs on the album. We've already mentioned my other favorite song, but anyway, but yeah, I guess he made the melody for this song one morning, and then he plugged his wah-wah pedal into his amp. And I don't know much about all these other terms, but anyway, but they decided to leave the original version and make another one. So I don't know what, but anyway, it's shredding guitar for sure, of course. And I mean, that just blows you out of the water when you first hear this song, I think. And especially if you're not like, because like I say, I mean, I listened to some other, like I had some Steve Vai solo albums, of course, and he's amazing too.
Sure is.
He's probably probably like Steve Vai a little more just because he's more flashy, I suppose, maybe in
He,
concert and stuff. And he played with David Lee Roth a few albums, tours that I seen him. So he's definitely
Shy
very
Boy is awesome.
flashy guy. Yes.
Yep. Hmm.
But anyway, yeah, it's a great first track and shredding guitars, and you can definitely see where we're going. Now, of course, he doesn't shred for the whole album, which we're going to get to. But anyway, we go to track 2, Ice 9. Oh, one thing I was going to mention, a lot of the times I'll talk about what do the songs mean and to interpret the lyrics. But since there's no lyrics, I guess we don't have to do that. So I have no idea what Ice 9 means. But anyway, what do you think of the song Ice 9?
This song opens with a bass groove. Satriani's wide vibrato creates a unique and bluesy vibe to it. The what's pretty neat about this is he takes the melody and he actually modulates keys to F sharp. I mean, you really have to know what you're doing when you're changing keys. And he continues a melody on. It's very similar. It's like a motif, is what you would call it. Um, and some of Satriani's frenetic legato playing is executed during the main solo. It's breathtaking. I mean, he really jumps up high and plays some awesome legato. Just these series we've talked about it a little bit, you and I, on a couple podcasts, but he just really is. He's very innovative, and I want to say Alan Holdsworth is one of the first guitarists to be given credit for legato playing. He's a good kind of a little more of a different style guitar playing, but Joe utilizes a similar technique where he's hammering on notes. He'll pick the note, then he'll hammer on with several fingers. He'll pull off with fingers. Sometimes you can pick it, pull off the notes, and Joe just does it. Just it's almost like breathing air for him, and it just sounds amazing. Awesome solo work.
I like you mentioned it kind of, but I like the build up of the song. It's obviously slower than Surfing with the Alien, and you have some slower licks at the start, but then he does do another shredding solo in there. But the song is a little slower because he's got a few rockin' songs in here, but of course he's not gonna do all rockin' songs for the whole album, so you got to kind of mix it up, especially when you have no vocals or lyrics or anything like that. Was I gonna say anything else about that song? No, that's about all I got for that one. Then we go to Crushing Day, which I already mentioned. Anyway, what do you think of this one?
So Crushing Day, I'm sure like you, Blake. By this point, when I picked up Surfing with an Alien, it was either 87 or 88. I was listening to some pretty heavy music. So like rhythmically, this one just kind of spoke to me. I was like, oh, here we go. This is a really driving guitar rhythm. It's a fat one, it's one of the faster songs on this album. The obviously the main riff is just crunches, and then the theme is a thing of he does, it's a thing of beauty, and man, the bends are amazing. What's kind of crazy is it's a super driving song, but the melody is actually in a major key, so that's kind of unique, where it has almost kind of a happy type delivery to it, but it's very catchy. His use of the whammy bar, we got to get that in there. It's the third track. We probably should have covered it more in the first opening Surfing, but wow, the whammy bars, he uses it like a voice. The solo section, he has some serious alternate picking with just some banging legato guitar. Let's see here. His use of harmonics later in the main theme really makes it even more musical. Great track. One of my favorites on the album.
And I find, and it's funny because I wrote this down before I remembered what I just said about Crushing Day, but when it comes to instrumental music, so this is the song I mentioned that it's the only solo that he prepared, I guess, for the album. It wasn't just improvised. But as I was listening to this and writing stuff down myself, I thought, gee, there's no like rules to instrumental music because he can just throw in a lick here, a lick there, a solo here. It's not like he's got a verse, chorus thing going on with no vocals. So I'm kind of saying how it almost sounds improvised, but this is the only one that wasn't improvised. So it's just kind of funny that I wrote it under the song, even though this is the only one that he planned out the solo. But yes, because he can just go off and play a lick here, a lick there, and it sounds so awesome. And like I say, I never really paid attention to how it was just a drum machine playing most of the time, or in all the songs except one, right? Except for the overdubs that were done. But yeah, but it's a great track. It's probably the heaviest, I guess you could say, on the album, the most metal song, along with Surfing with the Alien, whatever Satch Boogie when we get to that one. And of course, after the heaviest one, we have to go to probably the softest one. Always with me, always with you. So what do you think of this instrumental ballad, I guess I'll call it?
Yeah, this is it's funny. I was gonna write down the word ballad, but I chose not to, but it certainly is. I mean, it's a slower song. This is one of his favorites to play live. You know, I kind of closed out Crushing Day with talking about how the main theme was like very musical, especially towards the end. Well, this has to be his most musical piece on the entire album. Um, the melody of the song is incredibly emotional, and I read this recently. You might have caught this too, but he actually dedicated this song and wrote it for his wife Rubina. Um, and yeah, he creates some tension on this song with some really cool bends, and then there's some nice release as well. There's a tapping section in G major that he does, and it's far from difficult to play, which you know some of Satch's stuff is very intricate, but it's his note selection is just impeccable. I mean, every note choice that he uses for that tapping part, it sounds great, and that's what matters with music, right? Is how it sounds. Yeah.
Yes, and I like it must be hard to name when you do an instrumental album. I don't know how you decide what to call the song. Like Crushing Day was a little kind of crushing, I guess you could say, crushing solos or whatever. And but this one, it's like it sounds like a ballad. Again, there's no vocals or whatever, but and it's called Always With Me, Always With You, which sounds like a ballad. Like if this was a band that had a singer and and lyrics, you would think, oh, that's probably a ballad, that song. So you can kind of see that. And he just shows his diversity, and he's not just a shredder, he can also slow it down and do this and that. And then, of course, his nickname. I'm not sure why his nickname is Satch. Do you know why his nickname is? I mean, Satriani is his name. I guess that's where it come from.
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Yeah, oftentimes I just refer to him as Satch. Yeah, it's definitely stuck with him for quite a long time, hasn't it?
But do you refer to him as Satch because of the song called Satch Boogie?
No,
I don't know.
Okay. I don't, just because he's, you know, other musicians call him Satch. Sometimes you just say Satch for short. Not that Satriani is that difficult to pronounce, especially after you've said it so many times, you know.
But I wonder if that is where it came from, was this song or not.
It's quite possible. Yeah.
But anyway, so what do you think of Satch Boogie?
Oh, here we've got a mashup of rock, swing, and a dash of jazz. You know, as I mentioned too, really at the top of our podcast, you know, the video brought acclaim to, you know, Joe Satriani, and really brought some positive attention to him, and also other instrumental guitarists as well. Really put them on the map. It certainly put Joe, you know, front and center. The main riff is comprised of mostly pull-offs in the key of A minor. Yeah, it has just an insane hook to it. I actually learned, there was a point where I learned this from my very first guitar teacher. I used to be able to play it note for note. I don't know if I ever got the flange quite right for his tapping section, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, it's just such an insane hook, man. It's great. It's got this cool like feel to it. It's kind of like this bluesy, groovy, jazzy kind of vibe to it. But his use of dive bombs with the whammy bar are pretty common, and he's just so expressive with that bar. One particular highlight, here we go, is his use of the flanger with his tapping section on the fifth string. I like how you programmed the drums here to go into like a halftime feel. It just fits like a glove with that tapping part. What do you think about the old Satch Boogie there, Blake?
Yeah, this is probably my favorite one on the album. Isn't such, yeah, this is the only one that features the live drums actually too. Yeah, so that's
Mm-hmm.
probably why it's the best drumming song because it's not a machine. But it's definitely a big change. Of course, we just had the ballad and the slow one there with always with me, always with you. So you pretty much knew he's going to come with the fast one right after it. And yes, there's funky guitar solos and of course more shredding guitar solos and you kind of sometimes wish it's a 3 minute song. You kind of wish it would even be longer. But
Mm-hmm.
this, I guess, this guitar. Now I don't know what year this was, but it was quoted at Guitar World magazine readers poll, whatever. This is the 55th greatest guitar solo ever.
Mm,
Now I'm not sure what year
okay.
that was. And I think
Okay.
Surfing with the Alien also was on that list. Let me go back. I might have skipped that part. Yes, it was considered the 30th. Surfing with the Alien solo
Okay.
was 30th on that poll, but whatever. That's just, I don't know what would have been number one. Probably Eruption, probably, if I'm going to
Yeah.
guess right. But anyway, but yeah, it's a great song. And
Yeah.
I guess he also, I was going to mention this before, but I'll mention it now since I have it here that he played with Deep Purple on a tour because Richie Blackmore left, so they needed a guitar, so he played with them, and I guess they played the song a lot on the tour. They
That
threw
must
in
have been
Satch
cool.
Boogie with Deep
Yeah.
Purple, and Ian Gillan took a break, assuming it was Ian Gillan. I think he was listening, but yeah, it would have been cool to see Satriani, even though Richie Blackmore's awesome, of course. It would have been
Mm-hmm.
cool to see Satriani playing with Deep
Yeah.
Purple, and I'm
Can
sure he
I
did
add?
a fine job.
Can
Yes,
I add one thing? And
yes.
you are correct. There is definitely a live drummer on there. I wonder what that section with the tapping part. I read that they use flange on some of the drums as well. So maybe that's why it sounds like a drum machine. That section because the snare. If you listen to the snare drum, and this is where it'd be cool to actually have a drummer on here because it has this pop to it, but it's like a different type of sound. So that's where it sounds like machine like. It doesn't sound like an actual drummer. But I wonder what
Mhm.
that effect, like that flange effect, almost makes it sound like it's processed. It's definitely compressed. I know that's an effect that they used. Like he mentioned that in an interview. So that was just something I was going to kind of throw in there. But what a great track, man! Love that song.
Yes, I need to get a drummer on as a guest on a podcast. Maybe I can ask him. But anyway, okay. So then we go to Hill of the Skull, which sounds it's kind of funny because this is just a short one. It's under 2 minutes, and I'll actually say this before you go. Hopefully, this isn't
Mhm.
anything you have to say. Probably not. Okay, but it's kind of sounds like this is like an intro to what would be a heavier song. Like if it was a thrash or a death metal band, this was like your slow little intro leading into this great big crushing metal song. So that's what it kind of sounds like, and it's just kind of funny. The title of the song is "Hill of the Skull," which could be the title of a song by a death metal band, I suppose. So what do you think of the short one, Hill of the Skull?
Oh, that's a pretty interesting take, Blake. So for me, as much as I wrote about all these songs, I only wrote a little bit about this. As you aforementioned, it's a very short song. But I've got to say, even as a teenager, I felt like this could have been the soundtrack to a movie, right? To
Mm-hmm.
me, I hear like a science fiction kind of type, sound. Satch's use of his octaves and the deliberate slow tempo with the drum machine, it's pretty minimalistic, but it's very effective. It gives Skull an otherworldly soundscape, and that's
Mm-hmm.
actually all I wrote about it.
Okay, well that's fine. It's a short one anyway. It's
Mhm.
a if this was an album with lyrics, this would probably be the instrumental. But since they're all instrumentals, okay, then we go to circles. And what do you got for circles?
So a soft, clean guitar tone with chorus and just the right amount of delay begins our journey. A drum fill signals that this track is about to become another animal. And stop me if you've heard this, but the use of whammy bar abuse and legato, which by this point might fill you in that he is a master of the legato technique. Chaos ensues. I wonder how many strings he broke on some of those uncanny bends, and the whammy bar usage that he's done. I mean, circles just get so. I mean, there's like it's like controlled chaos, but it sounds great for the song. That buildup is, yeah, it's just. I mean, who thinks of this kind of stuff? Joe's one of the few.
I know with him, Whammy Bar, you're talking with him and Steve Vai, of course. Those are the two guys I would have heard first and thinking, geez, and I'd buy a cheap guitar and I think I gotta have a whammy bar with it. But of course, my cheap guitar would go out of tune so fast because, it's not made for that. It's not, they're the expensive guitars. But it was always fun to do it, even though your guitar would go out of tune. It was always fun to jam on that whammy bar and try to be like Joe or Steve Vai.
Oh yeah, those whammy bars definitely can throw a guitar out of tune, even with a nice Floyd Rose trim, which Satriani and Vai use. Yep, you can still even throw your guitar out of tune from time to time.
And just the way they sometimes make the guitar like talk, like Steve Vai on the David Lee Roth Yankee Rose song or whatever, which could be a July 4th song. But yes, so it's very cool. Okay, now Lords of Karma. This is probably the longest song on the album. It's almost 5 minutes. So what do you think of this one?
So the beginning of this song has a like Middle Eastern type sound. I'm not 100% sure, but maybe he used a keyboard or a guitar synthesizer. I own a guitar synthesizer, and it has some different presets and sounds that have this kind of, it's like, almost like a world music type of string sound. Sounds a little bit like a sitar. I didn't write that down, but it sounds a little bit like that. Once the piece picks up the pace, a sparse melody enters. While Joe is a legendary shredder, what sets him apart from many are his, from many axe slingers, is his keen sense of melody. With just a few notes, you can whistle or hum the melody. I mean, it's just instantly recognizable if you've heard the song before. But about halfway through the song, the distorted guitars enter and exit, and then the clean guitar re-enters with the synth playing a similar note selection as the intro. My personal favorite part of this song is, and it's a standout, is the way he manages to weave in this contagious outro guitar theme. I really like what he does there. And then later on, he layers the melody with a second guitar part. It's a harmony. And, wait for it, he enhances the track.
I know in the liner notes or whatever of the album, it does say there is an electric sitar somewhere, but it doesn't say what song it's on. And there is keyboards also. So you could be right for the song. Maybe that is the sitar because it gives that Egyptian or whatever kind of sound to it. So
Arabic kind of sound. You're right.
Yes. Then I don't really have anything to add to that. It's a good one too. But yes, then we go. What do we got here? Midnight. And this is another short one. So what do you think of this one?
Yeah, this is it's a slower tune. I wrote down Joe's use of 8-finger tapping is on full display on this quiet yet evocative piece. After conjuring up a subtle and effective melody for the piece, it morphs into this like Spanish like flavored guitar part. And then there's this neat, some clapping and just this real kind of subtle percussive part. It works really well with Joe's guitar part. It's a risky yet savvy idea how he brings in this Spanish section. He could have easily ended the song and made it shorter, but he chose to take it in a vastly different direction. Not only does he make it work, but it actually improves Midnight. It's a neat song. I like it.
Now, when you say finger tapping, do you mean both hands?
Correct. And
okay.
I was going to mention this, and I certainly would never dissuade or talk down about the legend of Eddie Van Halen, but it's not the standard you're using one finger on your right hand to tap, which Eddie is one of the very best at, and he was a pioneer. But he's actually using, in this song, Joe uses actually all four of his fingers on his right hand to tap. I've explored this technique. I started it about 4 years ago. It is a very difficult technique. Chris Letchford from Scale to Summit is extremely gifted. He's one of the best I've ever heard use the technique. But Joe uses it, and it's extremely difficult to use. But it has, I want to call it like it almost has kind of to me like a piano. Not that I've ever played piano. I never took lessons, but to me it almost has kind of a piano effect. Because you kind of have this additional like layer of melody of notes there, but it's very cool. And again, it's extremely difficult, but it kind of opens up some doorways too with playing guitar.
And I'm sure that's why the song, since it is all finger tapping, I guess, for this song, is why it's not really long, because I'm sure he wouldn't be able to keep it up for like 4 or 5 minutes. And so yeah, but that's a cool song too, or a cool, yeah, I guess we'll call them songs. I don't know, it's weird. And then we end off the album. Now this is just the regular album. Hopefully that's what you were looking at for this. Anyway, it ends off with Echo. And I don't know why this is called Echo. And is there echoes in the song? What do you think? What do you think of Echo?
Yeah, he has a little bit of reverb and delay in this tune, but yeah, it begins, with the rhythm section, with the with the drum machine and the bass guitar part. And they're syncopated. They're playing on the upbeat on certain parts, and not unlike several of Satch's other songs, he chooses just a few select notes for the main theme. It's an excellent melody theme. It really stays with you. I got a few different notes down here. I've never, I honestly, I don't talk too much about the song. For me, I start kind of getting into, and he goes into a great solo section later on in the song, which I didn't even cover. But here I've never seen him play this song live, but I'm sure he would deliver like he always does. And then I move on to, I'd be curious if Blake has the number of times he's played this song live. I'd be very curious, but it's a great song. And it's one of those songs where, like, I don't know about you, Blake, like, I don't know too many other people that are big Joe Satriani fans that aren't guitarists. I have like one good friend of mine. We see a lot of, we've seen quite a few shows together, and we've seen Satriani together, a few times, and Dream Theater and some other artists like that. But yeah, Echo is just not one of those songs that receives like a lot of heap and praise. It's not a super technical, flashy piece, but it's a very well written song. And like the rhythm section, yes, it's a drum machine, and the bass part's pretty simplistic, but it's you can tell it's very well thought out. There's open space for Joe to express the melody, and then his solo section. I think it's a great, an excellent choice for a closing track. But I do wonder how many times he's played this one live. I don't know if you have that in front of you, Blake. Not to put you on the spot here.
Well, I do now, since you talked a little more. I had time to look it up.
All right.
So according to setlist.fm website, he's played Echo 19 times live.
Okay.
This is the second least on this album. Hill of the Skull, he's only played 3 times. And of course, the top 3, you could probably guess, are Always With Me, Always With You, Satch Boogie, and Surfing with the Alien. And Ice Nine, he's also played a lot, over 600 times. And then there's a big gap to the next songs on the list. But this is the album he's played the most songs from live in his career. So I mean, it was the second album, of course, but so you're always going to play earlier stuff more than you are the newer stuff, because people want to hear the classics, right? So
you got it.
Anyway, yes, and so I didn't have anything. Well, now I have to go back to where I was. I don't. Oh, there's a little bit more emphasis on the bass in this, which is funny because he's also the bass player, but I don't know why he would worry, because I don't know how much he spends on the bass, but if you can play the guitar, I suppose you can also play the bass, or you can at least get away with it. Anyway, that's the album. Now, what would you rate this one out of 10?
Well, this might come as a huge shock to you and some of our other listeners, but this is going to be a resounding 10 out of 10. This, to me, is about as close as you can get to a perfect album. I'd say that about maybe a few more albums out there from other artists, but this album is a perfect 10. So Senor Blake, what do you rate this album?
I guess I'll give it a 9 again. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Mm,
I love it a lot now. It's been a
mm.
while since I've listened to it, of course. So it's been years
Ditto.
since I've
Hmm.
listened to like the whole album. But I
Hmm.
remember back then I listened to it a lot. Like I was really into these instrumental things, probably because of this album. And then I went and got Steve Vai and Ingve had some solo or instrumental albums before he started in with singers, and I probably kind of got away from it because once you get into all these thrash albums or whatever, and it's a little not boring to go back and listen to just instrumental because they're amazing solos and stuff. It's just that I guess the singing kind of keeps you interested, maybe for the long haul or whatever. But I know recently I bought a John Five album. John Five, who was in Marilyn Manson, and he's a great guitarist too. And he had an instrument. That's the first instrumental album I've probably bought in 20 years.
Oh
and
wow.
but it's awesome too. But
I saw him with Rob Zombie, and he is an accomplished guitar player.
yes,
I do need to check it out. And you had mentioned you picked up a John Five album. I'm
yes,
overdue to do that because I was impressed. He played really well live, and he definitely he has his own style. It's
yes,
very different. He's good. He's very good.
yeah. And but um but all the other like Satriani albums, like I said, are we Flying in a Blue Dream, which was the next one, which we briefly mentioned, and that had some singing on it, a few songs like Big Bad Moon, which is one of my
I
favorites.
hmm
And
yeah, I
it's a great
believe.
it's a great
Hmm.
album too. I think I might like that album better than Surfing with the Alien. Now maybe that's because there's a couple songs in there with some singing, so it kind of mixes it up a little bit. But I don't think I really listened to too much after a few live albums by Satriani, but I don't think I really consistently listened to his studio albums. I don't know if you did. Have you listened to
I
much?
I have I don't always get his new albums right when they come out, but I like I guess don't want to carry on, but I mean I like everything that he's released. And the one that I would actually point in your direction, and this came out I want to say in 98, but Crystal Planet is a sensational album. You've got to check that one out. That is one of my favorite Satriani songs. Ceremony is brilliant. There's some really cool tracks on that. Um, that's for me. That's just like half a notch below Surfing and Flying in the Blue Dream for me. But I do keep up with them. And Elephants, on from Mars is a really cool album. Again, I didn't buy it right when it came out, but I actually have that one spinning in my car. It's great, and again, he changes it up. That's the one thing where obviously being a guitarist for me, I guess my attention span is going to be a little bit. I can focus more on instrumental music. Obviously,
Mhm.
like you and most people, I listen to more music with vocals, of course, but I probably have a bit more patience, as far as listening to instrumental music goes. But Joe, I mean, he manages to reinvent himself on just about every album he releases, and Elephants
Mhm.
on Mars is no different. I'd recommend that one too. He has some really cool different influences on that. Um, I mean, he has some like clean guitar parts. I'm like, wow. I was like, it's just some of the stuff that he does is like is daring, but that's part of what makes it like you're like, okay, what's he gonna do next? It just kind of keeps your attention. He doesn't play it safe. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
And that's where like he's one of these few shred guys, and he's one of the pioneers. But he's one of those guys that I always keep going back to, going to the well and listening to like each of his albums because he
Mhm.
offers something new and fresh. And those melodies are just like you could hum and whistle. They're memorable.
Mhm.
I mean, like you and I and tens of the maybe hundreds of thousands of others like to hear the shredding, and there's a lot of skill and practice put into that. But it's nice to kind of come back to some of these melodies where it almost sounds like a singer could sing some of these notes. And to me, a lot of that is what kind of stays with you after you've listened to an album.
Yeah. And I think you do have to be a guitarist to like the album. I mean, if you like whatever death metal or thrash metal, you would appreciate his solos sometimes, but I think you might get bored when it gets to the slower parts or whatever. But if you're a guitarist, I think you can really appreciate everything more, or it makes you want to be a guitarist when you hear it or whatever.
Yep.
But yes, just like even like Dream Theater, even they have vocals, but if you're not a big musician fan, not I mean James LaBrie is a great vocalist, but I mean you have to like 20-minute songs where there's no singing for 5 or 10 minutes. So you have to be able to like music and appreciate music to get into something like that, or old Pink Floyd even too sometimes and things like that. So
yeah,
anyway, okay, what about
disagree with you?
What about seeing live? I know you have seen him live. What how many times have you seen him live or G3?
So I, as I mentioned here earlier, I saw him and Steve Vai. It wasn't G3, sadly, but still, you're talking about two top-rate pioneers, very innovative, expressive guitarists. I saw them at Warner Theater. It's a really nice place downtown Washington, D.C. Yes, gosh, it's really hard. I was kind of mulling over that question. I was trying to think about that earlier this morning and how many times I've seen him live. I've definitely seen him over 5 times. I don't believe I've seen him quite 10 times. So I'd say between 5 and 10 times. He's somebody I've followed for a very long time over my years of being a fan of rock, prog rock, metal music. And one friend of mine, he doesn't play guitar, but he's as big a Satriani fan as I am. So he loves Dream Theater too. So he certainly appreciates quality musicianship. So I want to say I've seen him maybe like 7 or 8 times. But G3, I saw him. I didn't catch the original. I really would have liked to have caught that with Eric Johnson and Vai, two more than capable guitarists. I did catch him with John Petrucci, and I actually met John Petrucci the day of the concert. I got really lucky in Maryland. I met him in a music store, Chuck Levin's Washington Music Center. But that show was an absolute treat. I saw him again with, let's see, he played with Yngwie. I did not catch that one. I don't believe he came to DC for that show. But I did see him again. Phil Collin from Def Leppard. He came and he played with them, but Phil Collin played more kind of slower, bluesier material. And he did fine. But I liked Joe and Vai. I liked them. Like, to me, they just kind of held my attention a little bit more. But then I've seen Joe play. I've seen him headline. I saw him open for Dream Theater. Well, it was like a split headline. And as much as I follow Dream Theater, I like Joe's set list better than Dream Theater's, if you can believe that. I like the songs that he chose to play over Dream Theater's for that particular show. Yeah. But he always delivers. I mean, he's so consistent. And that's why, to me, he's worth going and seeing. And concerts these days, as you know, they're not cheap. But he's just one of those guys. You got to just, if you've never seen him once, do yourself a favor. I mean, borrow some money from a friend if you need to, or a family member, but you got to see him once. How about you, Blake? How many times have you seen the almighty Satch?
No, excuse me. No, I've only seen him. I've never seen him by him solo, whatever. I mean, I've seen him at G3, like I mentioned before on earlier in the podcast with Steve Vai and Eric Sardinas. That's the only time I've seen Joe Satriani live, and that was at Toronto's Massey Hall, which you've been to when we saw Iron
great place. Yeah.
But so yeah, I saw him there, and that is the only time I've ever seen Joe Satriani live before, was that one. Now I've seen Steve Vai a couple I saw Steve Vai obviously at that. I don't think I ever seen him by himself either, except for the G3 thing. But I did see him with David Lee Roth 2 years in a row, I think, because he was his.
Oh, that's cool. That's pretty neat.
And so yeah, and Billy Sheehan was the bass player, and Billy Sheehan
He's
is
a
also
he's a monster.
he
He's a
he
great,
also he was
phenomenal
also at the
bassist.
G3, right? I'm not sure if he was
Hmm.
in Satriani's band or Vai's band. I forget.
Yeah, yeah. Him and Vi are pretty tight. Stu
Or
Ham,
maybe it was Vai.
oftentimes, not always. Stu Ham is oftentimes the recording
Mhm.
musician and touring musician with Satriani.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, so we're done with that. We better get a moving here, talking. And we're gonna finish the episode, like I said, with our top 10 guitarists from the countries we live in. And I gotta say, the Canadian one is I could probably easily do top 10 American guitarists easier than I could top 10 Canadian guitarists. Not that we don't have lots of great guitarists, but it's just they're not as well known, of course, to because they don't get as popular. Seeing that, and I know I'm gonna piss people off. Oops, I just swore. Sorry. When I don't
Oh,
have
you're fine. You're fine.
somebody from a band, and they're going to be, you live in Canada and you don't have this guy on your list. But anyway, I'm going to let you go first. So happy 4th of July on Thursday. Here's Eric with his top 10 American guitarists.
All
Of all
right. Well,
time.
thank you, Blake. I appreciate that, and happy early Canada Day on Monday.
Yes.
What's kind of funny is I got to share this with you real quick. We don't want the podcast to be 2 hours long, but I was invited actually by a guitar student. His parents are Canadian. They're celebrating tomorrow. What's funny is he's like, "We're gonna have hot dogs and beer. You should come on over, Eric." I was like, "Okay." I was like, then I'm like, he didn't say if it's for the 4th of July or if it's for Canada Day. But I'm like, so I'm gonna have to pop on by, and I'm sure they're celebrating both.
Yes,
Um,
probably.
yeah. So you know what? I never had a chance to touch base with you, and this is why I was literally pulling my hair out this morning, because I was like, did Blake want the 10 most talented guitarists in the U.S.? Did he want my 10 favorite U.S. guitarists? Did he want the 10 most influential guitarists? So I had a hard time. I'm not really sure what direction you went. You can tell me and then I'll share my list. I'm not going to change anything, but I
Well, I
wasn't
would just say I
100%
wanted
sure.
your favorite guitarist. It doesn't
My
have to
favorite.
be, because there might be a
Okay.
guy that you don't like, that maybe he's in a band that you don't like say,
Uh,
I don't know
okay.
who, but say you hated
Okay.
Metallica, but you know that Kirk Hammett's a great guitarist. But
Yeah.
you don't have to do that. You just put your 10 favorite is what I
Okay.
should have said,
Uh,
I guess.
okay. I probably shouldn't have changed my
But it
list,
doesn't
but
matter. You can do what you
yeah,
want.
yeah, I probably shouldn't have changed my list. But you know what? I'm gonna actually start it off. This will kind of make it a little more complex for me. Most of them would still be on this list. And
Hmm.
I chose US rock guitarists, like really
Okay.
more hard rock and heavy metal,
Yes,
and
that's
like
fine.
progressive rock, progressive metal. I
Sure.
felt like it would have been a little more challenging to incorporate some other guys like that were in like more like I do like some other stuff, like some finger style guitarists that are American, and I do like some slower stuff, maybe even pop. Like I do like the Edge from U2, but he's not. I wouldn't even call him rock. I mean, to me, that's kind of it's maybe alternative, but I didn't
Hmm.
include him in the list, or like any other, like Michael Hedges, who's a phenomenal, virtuoso on the acoustic guitar. Um, so for me, for the top US guitarists, I will have to change the list a little bit, but I'm going to start off, and I'm going to skip the honorable mentions. I'm going to just say my number 10 is going to be a tie between James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine, and
Hmm.
it's mainly for their rhythm guitar playing, because James Hetfield was an absolute game changer for heavy metal rhythm guitar playing. His down picking is just absolutely ferocious. If you sit down and you learn Master of Puppets, that song alone, your wrist is going to be on fire. Um, you know, Hetfield is just such a pioneer for heavy metal rhythm playing. And Dave Mustaine, similar. He does some excellent down picking as well. His is a little bit more, I would say, frenetic. It's a little bit busier, where sometimes he'll choose to do. He does some down picking, but he'll do more of the 16th notes, alternate picking. And I'm a huge fan of Megadeth and Metallica, so I've got to get both of those guys in there at number 10. I would say at number 9, I'm going to go with we're going to keep it heavy. I'm going to go with Dimebag Darrell. He's somebody that into the early 90s, obviously, we had the whole grunge invasion and music changed dramatically. It really didn't speak to me very much. So when, Pantera, honestly, they came out really before. They've been around for a while. But Cowboys from Hell was was certainly a metal injection with a groove. And that's the thing is, you talk to any of those band members, and Dimebag Darrell, rest in peace. But you talk to any of those guys, Phil, and obviously Dimebag's brother, rest in peace as well, Vinny. But they're like, if you ask any of those band members, and the bassist as well, they're like a groove metal band. And Dimebag was really one of those guys that put that guitar, he has this just great sense of rhythmic, just groove to it. Sometimes it was speed metal, like thrash metal. Other times it was just in your face. But he just really had this cool sense of just this unique kind of groove and this rhythmic sense. But then also he would kind of open up his Pandora's box of, he was a big, acolyte, if you will, of Eddie Van Halen. So he would throw in some of these cool, like tapping sections. And, we talked about Whammy Bar with Satch, but I mean, he had some great, Cemetery Gates. I mean, how many strings did he break on the outro of that song? But yeah, his use of the whammy bar and his speed picking and legato playing, he influenced so many guitarists in the early to mid 90s. It's not even funny. I'm going to jump on to, this is kind of hard because now I'm really going off the beaten path on my top 10. Alex Skolnick from Testament. He's a guy, he studied jazz at a pretty young age. You can definitely tell this guy, Alex Skolnick of Testament, he had his 3-piece, like he has a jazz band. I didn't really hear too much of that. I probably need to give that a fair chance and a listen. But, he's one of those guys where like Testament was a really hard-hitting thrash metal outfit, out on the, Bay Area thrashers out in the West Coast. And he's one of these guys, he's slinging a bright yellow Ibanez guitar, and it's like, who is this guy? Everybody else is wearing black. They got black guitars, and he has a bright yellow guitar here. I think he even had a pink guitar at one point, but he has these neon colored guitars. But his guitar playing, his lead guitar playing, just, man, it really stood out. And he had a knack for just writing some incredible, technically proficient solos that really fit Testament's. And super Eric Peterson's an insanely underrated rhythm guitarist, but he would Skolnick wrote some just breathtaking guitar solos with some awesome sweeps. Skolnick's an absolute monster. So I guess I have him slated there that I want to say 8. 7, I would go with Michael Romeo from Symphony X. It's kind of funny. I talked about him briefly in our last top 10 albums of 97. And Romeo is just one of these consistent guys from the progressive metal outfit Symphony X. He's just a dazzling US born guitar player. I think, I should have looked this up. I think he's born in Jersey. I want to say he's a Jersey guy, but might be New York. I might be wrong. But he's a super gifted guy. I know he's worked at Guitar Center, which that floored me. But it just goes to show you can't always make enough money from your full-time band. Yeah. But he's he's just he's one of those guys that was heavily influenced by Malmsteen, as many of the Mike Varney shredders from the 80s was. But he is just a great guitar player. Awesome rhythm guitar player too, but his lead playing was very technical. And he has a really cool sense. His style is one of my favorites. He has that classical sense. So I like a lot of that sound. Obviously, I like different types of guitar playing, but I've always kind of gone that direction. And Romeo is one of those guys, a lot like Yngwie, that has that flair for the classical sound. Next in line, am I at what, 6 now?
Yeah,
because I've definitely jumped off my list. I would say would be Jeff Loomis he played with Nevermore. He played with a band that you liked a lot, a death metal band,
Arch Enemy.
Arch Enemy, right? He played with them for a little while. Nevermore is one of my all-time favorite bands, period. And I enjoy his 2 solo albums that he has. They are explosive, is one way to put it. Conquering Dystopia is, I argue with anybody, that's one of the heaviest albums I've listened to before. I don't listen to death metal. I appreciate some of the musicianship in extreme metal, like in death metal and some black metal. But some of the music on there is absolutely pummeling and punishing. I mean, the rhythms and the drum and bass playing are so flipping heavy and just chugging, and it sounds like a tank is coming for you. But I can't recommend Conquering Dystopia enough if you like very heavy music with some just over the top shredding and just incredible guitar playing. And there are some melodies in there too that it's like, wait a minute, this guy doesn't only shred, and he shreds with the best of them, but he writes some really just some insane, need to come up with some new adjectives, but yeah, his guitar playing is off the charts. He is a very gifted player. And I got an email like years ago, and it was him auditioning for a guitar like championship, and it was him at like the age of 16, I want to say. No, it was 19. It was 19. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, wow. I was like, man, I mean, I was listening to his playing. I was like, I think he's actually better than some guys that are like, whatever, in their 30s, 40s. And I was like, this guy is just a prodigy. Obviously he works at it, but I feel like he's just a prodigy. But enough gushing about Loomis. We'll move on. Steve Vai probably would have been a little bit lower on my list. I do love you, Steve Vai, but he's on this list. I have him up at number 3 for most talented rock guitarists. For me, he'd be a little bit lower, but he's still definitely in my top 10. He's, as you mentioned, talent-wise, his talent, he could easily be number 1. I mean, he is, to me, I told this to my buddy Brian, who's the big like Satriani and Dream Theater fan. I feel like he is actually the most creative guitarist out there, period. I don't care what genre of music. I don't know what his diet is. I don't know what his what his guitar regimen is, but whatever he's doing, the right side of his mind, just the way he thinks, the way he writes guitar music in general, like Passion and Warfare is one of the best instrumental albums of all time. When that album came out, my girlfriend would be like, Eric, would you stop? You've already listened to this album twice in one day. Do you need to hear it again? Yes, it's the best album right now. I have to listen to it. And why don't you can go listen to your Pearl Jam or, your whatever you're listening to. And I was like, I'm going to listen to it some more. I'm sorry. I got to listen to it some more, the crowds, the audience is listening. I mean, yeah, for the love of God. Wow. What a song. But I mean, obviously his new stuff, like I'm guilty as charged. I was listening to G3 in the car on the way over to a guitar lesson yesterday. And it's the second release with Petrucci, shocker. But building a church is just what a sensational song. But where does he get these ideas with this tapping? You have to pull it up on YouTube. Well, you've seen him live, you said once, but it's a very unorthodox way that he taps that intro. And then you have Tony McAlpine, who's he's a an accomplished shredder himself back from the 80s, Edge of Insanity and several other releases. But he's playing a keyboard part that's keeping up with Vi's tapping. I'm like, it's almost like an overload. It's almost too much, but it's really cool the way they do that on Building the Church. But yeah, Vi's very belonging on a top 10 list as far as rock guitarists.
Yes.
Excuse me. I would say as far as creativity and talent, this guy is born in my hometown, Washington, D.C. He goes by the name, he's still under the radar, but it's because he's an instrumentalist. His band has put out 5 albums, but and I've seen him live before once. Hope to see him again. Tosin Abasi is his name. He's not a household name. He plays for Animals as Leaders. It's a 3-piece band. He plays on an 8-string guitar. He has a drummer. His fellow guitar player plays an 8-string guitar as well. He manages to combine jazz, dent music, which is like super heavy syncopated music like Meshuggah, Tesseract, there are others, Periphery, things like that. But he also incorporates these really neat, like some of these like ear candy melodies in there. And then his shredding capability is like, it's almost like a neo kind of Steve Vai. I hear a little bit of Vai in him, a little bit of Satriani, but he certainly has his own style. But he is, oh my gosh, he's one of the most gifted guitar players I've ever heard before. The first time I heard him, I was like, what is this? What the heck is he thinking? I don't want to cuss, but I was just like, wow, this guy is just too much. But I strongly recommend Animals as Leaders. I probably wouldn't recommend it to just like hard rock metal fans, but if you like lead guitar, if you like innovative, creative guitar playing, he does like slap guitar on his guitar, and I'm not a huge fan of that technique, but he really does it well. So it's very interesting how he does it. But yeah, he utilizes that technique really well on their third album. But yeah, when I saw them live, when I saw him on the Generation X tour, I want to say it was 2019. It's something that Steve Vai put together. It's similar to a G3, but it was 4 guitarists, and Zach Wilde was there from Black Label Society. He was great as always. Nuno Betancourt was there. He's a really good player, obviously from Extreme fame. Yngwie was there, and Yngwie was the flashiest of them all. He loves himself some Yngwie, but yeah, quite the guitar virtuoso. He's kind of like Paganini on the guitar if you've never heard him. Yeah. But then there was Tosin, and he opened things up, and there were guys there that there were some bikers that were there. You could tell Zach Wilde had the majority of the fans, at least 50% of the fans looked like they were bikers or wannabe bikers. They had the leather vests, had the had the big old rings and the spikes. But there were several people with their mouths wide open, and it's like, what kind of music is this? And that's the way Tosin is. For my number one guitar player, my very favorite guitar player is John Petrucci. I'm looking, and I made I guess a critical failure. Randy Rhoads would be on this top 10 list, so no honorable mention. He would definitely be on my top 10. So my apologies, Randy Rhoads. You were a godsend, a huge influence on me personally, and to many other guitarists out there. Randy Rhoads would be on this list for his solo from Mr. Crowley alone. That outro guitar solo is one of the best. But I'm going to jump forward to John Petrucci. His right-hand guitar picking technique is legendary. He was influenced, you probably know this, by Steve Morris of the Dixie Dregs. He's a great guitar player in his own right. But Petrucci is one of those guys where just his technique is just so jaw-dropping. And the first song I ever heard by Dream Theater, as many fans, not all fans, but many Dream Theater fans, was Pull Me Under. And man, I mean, just what in his level of guitar knowledge and then his orchestration on that song and many other songs. He's just so incredibly skilled. But then you jump ahead to a song like A Change of Seasons. Well, you better have an attention span. You're looking at a 28-minute song. I haven't listened to the song in a while, so it's well over 20 minutes. But it goes through these little like opuses and different like just segs and like mini songs. And that's what you're talking about with John Petrucci. You know, Scenes from a Memory Part 2. Great musicianship as the entire band. But yeah, his just knowledge of the guitar, his ability to break the rules of music theory, and just his expressiveness, it's excellent. He can slow things down too. Like Hollow Years has just such a memorable guitar solo, but it's on a nylon string guitar. He's not shredding at all, but I mean that's what he does best. And his rhythm guitar playing is, I think it's often overlooked. But if you look at something like The Shattered Fortress, I'll guarantee you there are some fans of other like death metal and extreme metal that I'm sure they love some of the rhythm guitar playing. They probably don't like James LaBrie's vocals, the clean vocals, but wow, Portnoy's just his double bass is just, oh my god, it's almost like Machine Gun like. And then the rhythm guitar part is so stinking heavy, and it just crushes, absolutely just breaks some speakers. But yeah, Petrucci is the man. He's my all-time favorite. It's pretty hard because I would probably say Rhodes would be, if if I were to write my list properly like I had it yesterday. Rhodes would have been second for me, but Petrucci would still be number one. Just everything that he can show you on an album. And I'm not a huge fan of the Astonishing, that double album, that concept album, which didn't go across very well for most fans. But even his guitar playing on that is still excellent. Yeah, he's something else. But okay, I've probably taken up too much time. The podcast is going to be 2 hours. Blake's face is red. He's like, come on, Eric, get it over with, man. I'm going to talk about my Canadian guitarist, which I got to admit, I'm very anxious to hear. I'm really looking forward to this.
Okay, so now
that's my lengthy list. But I'm a guitarist. I'm a guitarist, so that's my defense.
Yes, that's right.
That's my defense.
I'm not going to talk about my guys as much as you did your guys, because I don't have all the guitar lingo to talk about. And a lot of these, I don't know if you'll even know who they are. You might know the bands when I mention their names. If I didn't mention the band's name, you might not know them, because I know these Canadian bands, they don't get the publicity in the United States or whatever. Some of them are more popular in Europe than they are in the United States. But anyway, so here we go, top 10. And now I'm going to start right off and say I don't have Alex Lifeson from Rush on my list.
Come on, Blake. No, go ahead, man.
Because I'm not a big Rush fan. I mean, I like some Rush songs, Limelight, Spirit of Radio, stuff like that, but I just never really got into Rush, so that's why he's not on my list. Now, my number 10, is there anybody else? I think that's all I was going to say that it's not on my list. I mean, there's death metal bands in Canada, but I don't have any of those guys here. I never got into that too much. And so anyway, most of these guys will be probably thrash guitarists. Most of them.
Cool.
But I'm starting off with a punk. I guess it's a punk. I don't know. They call them a punk band out of Canada. I don't know if you've ever even heard of the band. But the guy's name is Gordon Lewis. The band's name is Teenage Head. I don't know if you've ever heard that name before.
I can't say that I have.
Okay. But their album from 1982 called Some Kind of Fun is still one of my favorite albums of all time. I still listen to it regularly. So if you want to check them out, because I got to have an album. I'm going to mention an album. So if people have never heard of them, they can go check them out. So Some Kind of Fun is a great album. They're supposed to be Canada's answer to the Ramones, even though I wouldn't really consider them that punkish, if you want to say that. But anyway, yeah, it's a good album. And actually reading his name today for this list is the first time I even paid attention to what his name was. And it's not that he's definitely a great guitarist. It's just one of my favorite albums from Canadian bands. So that's why it's there. Now, number 9 is Jeff Healey. Do you know Jeff Healey?
I do.
Okay. His biggest fame is probably because he was the music band in the movie Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, as they were the band that people were throwing beer bottles at and stuff against the cage when there was fighting going on or whatever. But anyway, he's a blind guitarist from Canada. He usually plays the guitar while he's sitting down on his lap and he's playing it that way. And I just remembered that. And See the Light from 1988 is his debut album. And so you should probably check that out. He's more bluesy than rock or whatever, but he's a
He's a
talented
good player.
for
Yeah,
sure.
he's a good blues guy.
Okay, number 8, I have one of these 80s Canadian thrash bands, Dave Carlo from the band Razor. And they had, let's see, I guess Executioner's Song would be my favorite album, and that was from 1985. And they kind of had a 20-year break, but they did have an album out a couple years ago, and it was pretty good too. Number 7 is another thrash band from Canada, Sacrifice, and their guitarist Rob Urbanati, if I'm saying that right. And their album from, let's see, I'm not sure. I think this was their second album, Forward to Termination in 1987, is definitely one to check out. My number 6, guess what? Another thrash album or band is Exciter and John Ricci. That's Ricci. I'm sure it's called Ricci. And you can check out 2 of their albums, Heavy Metal Maniac in 83 or Violence and Force in 1984. And I was big on all these thrash because I really like thrash, of course, from Metallica and Megadeth and Testament here in those bands. And Canada had, I guess, those 3 bands would be in Canada's big 4 for thrash, along with another band, which I'll mention later on in my list. So then number 5, I got Tim Roth from Into Eternity. Do you know Into Eternity? I think you do.
You know what's funny is I actually saw them. Well, a cousin of mine gave me one of their songs. Gosh, I'm trying to think of what it's called, but I saw them actually open up for Dream Theater,
Yeah, so
and they're definitely some skilled musicians. The
yeah.
vocalist was kind of all over the place, but yeah, man, they're definitely some skilled musicians. I didn't know they were Canadian though, so I just learned something new today.
Yeah, well, at least he is anyway. And I know the band was
Okay.
based in Canada. They did have a female singer for a while, but I'm not sure if she was Canadian or not. And I'm not really sure if they're still going or not. I'm not really
Mm-hmm.
positive about that. But yes, they're definitely progressive metal, maybe a little heavier than Dream Theater
Mm-hmm.
overall.
Yeah.
But yes. Okay, and my number 4 is Logan Mader. Does that name sound familiar?
Ooh, I feel like I have some homework to do
because
after this
because
podcast, Blake.
he's actually been in 2 American bands. He doesn't have a Canadian. Well, he's just Canadian born, but he was in Machine Head for a while, and then
Okay.
he left Machine Head and formed the band Once Human, which is a melodic death metal band with female vocals with oh my god, I forget her name now for some reason. Hart. I forget her first name. Why am I forgetting her first name? But anyway,
That's
what
okay.
is the
Yeah.
group she's in now? And I believe they're making a new album right now. Hopefully, it comes out this year. And Lauren Hart. Sorry, I don't know why I could forget her name. But anyway, Lauren Hart
Okay.
is the vocalist of that band, and it's one of my favorite bands. So he's their guitarist. And yeah, he was in Machine Head on their first couple of albums, as far as I can remember, anyway. And number 3, I got Lips from Anvil. And everybody knows them because they've been around forever. And I
That's the
guess
truth.
if you've never heard of Anvil, I guess Metal on Metal would be an album to check out, or Forged in Fire, and those are from I think 83 and 84, I believe. And my number 2 is, now you said you would kill me if I didn't have them on my list. So I got Jeff
Not
Waters.
really. There you
Jeff
go.
Jeff Waters from Annihilator, of course, a great riff master and soloist, and most of his band members are always American, I think, but he is Canadian, so we consider Annihilator Canadian because it's his band. And I think
He's so gifted.
yeah, and so yeah, I have like all their albums, I think, and different singers. He had a lot of different musicians that joined him and stuff. And we did do a podcast on an Annihilator album, Alice in Hell. So you want to look that up. It's in one of our podcasts. It's probably the only one of this whole list that has been on a podcast. Yeah. Sometime I'll have to do an anvil one with somebody. Anyway, and my number one guitarist from Canada is Rick Emmett from Triumph. And he's just because I was probably into Triumph way back, even before metal. I discovered metal, so Triumph's not really metal. I mean, they have some stuff that could definitely be metal, like Rock and Roll Machine song. That's an amazing guitar solo in that one. I have a videotape of them from the US Festival, because they were at the US Festival and they were like so popular back then. And Rick Emmett's guitar work is amazing on that. And the singer is their drummer is the singer, on most of the songs. Rick Emmett does some of the vocals. But yes, Triumph Allied Forces is probably my favorite album by them. And their first album, like I say, Rock and Roll Machine, is a great song. It's like a 7-minute song with like a 4-minute guitar solo. So if you don't know that song, definitely look up Rock and Roll Machine. It's an amazing song.
Nice.
So there we go. You probably only knew like what, 3 or 4 of those.
I the thing is, I didn't know many of them. Like I'm sure I've heard Razor, like some of their songs before, but yeah. And what's the Sacrifice?
Yeah,
I'm sure like I'm sure like back in the day. Yeah, I've definitely heard Exciter and didn't Exciter influence Metallica? I feel like Exciter influenced some of the bands that we listened to, right?
They were right there. I think Kill 'Em All, like in that first year, 1983, Kill 'Em All came out. Slayer's Show No Mercy came out, and Exciter's Heavy Metal Maniac came out. Yep. Those are like the first 3 thrash albums that were ever released, I think. Okay. So they were there. I don't know if they influenced. I know Metallica liked them and stuff like that. I don't know if they influenced.
And they toured with them.
Metallica came first.
Yeah, they toured with them. I know that. Yeah, they definitely toured.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and they're still around today he's John Ricci, the guy that was in it. He's not in the band anymore, but they're still around touring anyway. I don't know if they're making any albums, but all these old groups are out touring anyway to make some money. Anyway, so that's it. So yes, that's our Joe Satriani and our top guitarist thing. So I'm going to say goodbye here, and thanks, Eric, for joining me on this one. You're the guitar guy, so you have all this technical stuff about everything on here.
Thanks a ton. Hopefully it wasn't too long, but as you could tell, I gushed and I enjoyed it. Thanks, man.
Joe Satriani is worth that. Okay, and so again, everybody listening on Monday, if you live in Canada, happy Canada Day. If you live in the United States, on Thursday, happy 4th of July. And I'm sorry to all the other countries. I don't know all your birthdays. You're going to have to email me your country's birthdays so we can say happy birthday to your countries, because I don't have time to do everything. Okay, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.